want to give a shout out to Catholic Charities. Catholic Charities does such a great job in our community, and I don't know how the Lubbock community would be what it is without Catholic Charities. I've known Ms. Chambers and Ms. Rodriguez for a while. Ms. Rodriguez and I worked more recently together at Priority Intervention Academy, which is one of our campuses in the Lubbock Independent School District, where students who get in trouble with their home school get sent for a little vacation. And Ms. Rodriguez told me about the kinship care program, and it didn't really soak in for me. And then I was asked to do the training in diversity and equity and inclusion. And in the process of doing the research around that and blending it with the kinship care, it really it really touched me. And, it made me realize, I don't know if there's not a single family that doesn't experience a time maybe when they do kinship care. I think back on my family of origin, and I know that my mother's family did, and for sure with cousins that her father brought into their family. And my parents hail from East Texas, by the way. And so I'm talking back in the 1930s.
Gosh,
20s and 30s.
Oh, let him makes us sound old now.
And I know for a fact that two of my mother's cousins came to live with them in Longview. And then when my mother and my father migrated to Washington, D.C. to get away from Jim Crow, which is another story. East Texas was Jim Crow at that time, and they wanted to get away from that to accomplish a certain goal they had in mind. My father in particular, he wanted to be an attorney, and they wouldn't let black people go to law school in Texas at one time. So he migrated to Washington, D.C., where he heard that there was a startup law school that blacks had started in Washington, and he went to Washington and wound up graduating and became the first African-American assistant DA in Washington, D.C. And this is like late 40s, early 50s. And I was born in early 50s, 51. But anyway, the issue of kinship, again, the two cousins that had lived with my mother, they migrated to Washington, D.C. too. So I was able to grow up in their shadow and their eldership, and that was a good thing. My wife has her own stories that she'll share with her family situation. Oh, and in our particular family, I have a grand niece that came to live with us for about 5 years. Yeah. And it was trying. But, I think about one of the issues that Ms. Chambers talked about with the resources, because that's a real world issue. Can't get away from that, right? You're taking in folks to live with you, and so there's a financial burden there. It's real. And in our case, my grandniece's mother was situated financially pretty well, and she was able to be a resource as well as a resource we provided. So it worked out. It worked out good. It worked out good. That grandniece has gone on to become a police officer in the Washington D.C. Police Force.
And she was headed down the wrong path. But it just shows from a lot of the reading that we've been doing the difference that kinship and raising or helping out with those within your own families that need the help benefit. They really benefit sometimes more so than being in foster care. And now we have foster care, we need foster care. But it's not always the best solution for everyone. Some people have really good experiences, and Lord knows where we'd be without it, because we don't have places to put people now. But some people don't have really good experiences, and we need people to share those kinds of things with us too. But what they do have is pieces that allow them to be more financially able to care for the people that they take in, whereas people in our situations don't always have that. But sometimes we don't need them. We didn't even know anything like that existed when we had our niece. Not that we really thought that we needed to use a resource like that, but Lord knows there's so many other people that need the financial means to help them to care for those that they love and want to keep with them, want to help out. They need financial resources to help with housing. and food and all kinds of things, clothing, and they need community support. And those kinds of things aren't often provided in this type of situation, especially in places like Texas.
And we're gonna get into it in the presentation. Let me see. We have a overview, and we may jump around, but this is somewhat an overview. So we're gonna get to the kinship care after we talk about diversity and equity and inclusion. And maybe we have quite a lot of videos because just as a disclaimer, my wife and I aren't professionals in this area, and if you go on YouTube, oh my goodness, you'll find such a wealth of valuable information from professionals in the area. And so we've tried to glean from what they have shared on YouTube and put it together into a presentation. And also, we want to keep in mind that some of this information isn't like set in stone in terms of, there are different opinions about diversity and its values. And those are all topics that we have to talk about. You know? So you're gonna see somebody who's gonna say, hey, you know, screw diversity, and just want to throw it out the door completely. But by far, most of the professionals will talk about it, and they're coming from the business sector, and there's a very tangible issue within the business sector that we're gonna talk about. So we want to show an overview video first.
The distinction and the relationship between diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity is the presence of differences that may include race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, ethnicity, nationality, socioeconomic status, language, disability and ability, age, religious commitment or political perspective, populations that have been and remain underrepresented among practitioners in the field and marginalized in the broader society. Equity is promoting justice, impartiality, and fairness within the procedures, processes, and distribution of resources by institutions or systems. Tackling equity issues requires an understanding of the root causes of outcome disparities within our society. Inclusion is an outcome to ensure that all individuals feel and/or are welcomed. Inclusion outcomes are met when you, your institution, and your program are truly inviting to all. Inclusion is achieved when all individuals are able to participate fully in the decision-making processes and development opportunities within an organization or group. As you can see, each concept builds on the next through an intentional intersection. We must find ways to celebrate our diversity, to embrace opportunities for equity, allowing for students, colleagues, and friends to experience inclusion. These concepts do not exist in isolation. So what can you do? Seek out ways to embrace diversity in your program, your institution, your community, and your universe. Be an advocate for equity. Call out racism, sexism, and injustice when you see it. Be an ally. Create spaces in your universe where everyone feels welcomed. Change starts from within. Keep engaging and learning to make a difference. Let's continue the conversation.
What acronyms are, right? I always use them in teaching as a way to help students cement information. You can come up with your own abbreviations to help you remember specific concepts or words or things like that. So in this, I'm looking at the terms or terms that you will see, the abbreviations that you'll often see or hear when we're talking about these topics and concepts. You'll see DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. You'll see DIE, which is diversity, inclusion, and equity. You may see EDI, which is equity, diversity, and inclusion. and you'll see IDE, which is inclusion, diversity, and equity. Mixture of terms here. The last one I have there is IDEA, which is inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. All of those terms basically are used interchangeably, and there's no one right way to say it or talk to people about it or write about it. So that's the most important thing for you to remember. Now, and Leon and I have discussion over this one. The second one is DIE, and that term, it doesn't bother him at all, okay? But there are people there that think that you shouldn't use DIE because the first thing you see when you're looking at that is die. And we're not about dying. We're not here to talk about dying. We're here to talk about living and living well and helping others to do the same thing. So to me, you should reframe that into a more positive type of acronym. But you will see that one. And as a matter of fact, you'll probably see DEI and DIE the most, wouldn't you say?
DEI.
DEI and DIE, okay. But I've seen all of the others just in preparing for this presentation. And the last one is kind of an interesting concept because it's one that you probably will not come across, but there are certain people that hope that it will be used more in the future to encompass or embrace all of these concepts. And the idea is that you're going to look at inclusion because it is the most important to some people. And if you have proper inclusion, then that's going to lead to diversity because you've included people with diverse backgrounds. That will lead to equity, and you need access in all of those areas. Okay, so it's an idea that hopefully will become used more in the future. Oh,
Just copy that.
no, I should have. That would have been smart.
So let's see what we have.
Oh, I can, I don't know why.
We didn't mean for
Okay,
kinship.
I can, but this is a handout that has to do with kinship, and we just put it at the beginning. We talked about putting it at the beginning or the end because we're going to talk more about kinship later. But you do have access to a handout here that everybody can take. It's this exact handout, and I wanted to include it because the handout has really good information in terms of some resources that may be available for you to access, but you need to go on a computer to access them. And on the handout that you will receive, it has the exact web address at the top that you would have to type into your browser to pull this exact sheet up, okay? And when you do that, you will see links like this blue link that you can actually click into to get an idea of what is available in terms of resources, like the African American Grand Families, helping children thrive through connection to family and culture. And it's a whole toolkit underneath and resources that could be used for that particular situation. Okay, so I just wanted everybody to have it as kind of a resource sheet that you could use at some point in time just to see what's there in your spare time, because you have so much of it, I know. All right.
And clearly, you all have a whole table full of those are local resources.
Oh, yeah.
Sure, so definitely want to start there. So let's look at definitions. We'll start with diversity. And we have a video that we can use for that. It's a warm up.
So before I begin today, I would like you to just take 10 seconds and look around you and say hi to the people around you. Go.
Hi.
Hi. Great. Thanks for doing that. It's quite interesting actually being up here to see you all do that. It was a mix of waves, handshakes, some people were smiling and laughing. So I want to ask you one thing. What did you see? Did you notice what somebody was wearing? Their hair color? Probably their gender. A lot of things. But what did you think of that?
Yes.
Now, look around you again and look at that person. Don't say anything. You don't have to tell them what you think of them. I don't want to embarrass you. But I know you're probably making decisions and conclusions about the people around you. Now, All of that was to kind of stall, to give you a chance to look at me and to make judgments about me. I know you're judging. I would be too. I can't really see all of you clearly right now, but I'd be judging. You see, it is these things that we do that help inform how we see each other. And the conclusion of this experiment is something you probably already know. We take on average about 7 seconds to make impressions to others and to take in impressions of others. We then take those impressions to make conclusions about one another and determinations. So, you probably saw a woman, right? A black woman, fantastic. Black hair color, a couple of gray streaks in there. Can't see my eye color really from up here, but I have brown eyes. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I was born in Kenya, in Nairobi, but I actually grew up in a small town outside of that. This is really not small, it's only a town, all the same, called Nyeri. I moved to Baltimore when I was 10 years old with my family. I've been in the US ever since. I've been privileged to live and work in three countries and travel to dozens more places. You see, all of these things have influenced who I am. I've also been fortunate to have very diverse friends, people from all walks of life, different nationalities, cultures, and backgrounds. You see, it is these things that are hard to know within the first 10 seconds that you meet somebody. Now, if you look around this room again, would you know who is in this room just by looking at them in the first 7 to 10 seconds? Would you have known all this about me? Probably not. You see, throughout my life, culture and cultural diversity have been at the forefront. Again, I've been fortunate to have such a wonderful group of friends. And through our friendships, we have taught each other about our traditions, through shared meals, celebrations, and also by just having conversations with one another. This is a picture that was taken a few years ago at a baby welcoming ceremony that in my culture, we call Tega. And these are my friends. People would always question me about what these look like. And I said one day, why don't you come and experience it? And they did. So, this was all to show you just how diverse we all are. Now imagine your life as a jigsaw puzzle. What would be the pieces that make up who you are? For me, it would be my faith, my family, my heritage, my travels, my favorite foods. Again, I'm from Baltimore. My friends, my godson, and my love for philanthropy, education, and the arts. Now, if all these pieces make up little old me, what would the pieces that make up this room today? Imagine the pieces that would fill up this room, your workplaces, your classrooms, even your local coffee shop. So I ask you, who are you? And what would your puzzle pieces be? You see, in today's world, we focus a lot on racial diversity, and not so much on cultural diversity. Not so much on really what makes up who we are. You see, sometimes we look at people and we say, on the outside, they look alike, right? But we don't take into account that people see things very differently, despite all other things looking alike. Anybody remember this phenomenon? So, how many of you saw black and blue? And this is actually not rhetorical, right? How many of you saw white and gold? I was white and gold as well. How many saw both? There's about 5 hands. The point of this experiment, which admittedly at first I had no idea what it was that we all have preconceptions about what others see. And I know people who try to convince others that they were wrong and that they should see it the way they saw it. But the fact of the matter is, everybody was right. It was actually more about biology and how your eyes and your mind interpreted this image. But it was also about the perspective of it, where your eye focused first. For me, I looked right at the dress, because we're trained to focus on the image that's at the forefront. But for those who focus their eye on the background color, they actually saw a different color. No matter how many times I tried, I never saw black and blue. Now, Now that we've covered what people see on the outside, it doesn't always mirror what we see and what we know people are on the inside. Let's go to the next topic. Let's go to diversity. This concept is in everything and it's everywhere today. The concept of increasing diversity is all around us. It's in mission statements and value statements at corporations. Companies even have positions that are catered to helping increase diversity. They're diversity champions, they're diversity officers, and if you're Serena Williams, you're the newest board member of SurveyMonkey with the sole goal of increasing diversity, not just in that corporation, but also in the tech industry at large. You see, my point is not to discount diversity as a concept or belittle it. Quite the contrary. What I want to say to you today is that we should look beyond just who people are on the outside. It's not just about hiring more women or more people of color. It's about hiring people who have a diverse background, diversity of perspectives. We should ask more about what people go through by the time they come to a certain point in their life, their adversities, the triumphs and tragedies that they have experienced. It is these things that really make up the true identity of who we are. It's quite easy to just say, yes, you're a woman, yes, you're a man, yes, you're this, or yes, you're that. But we should move beyond just strengths and weaknesses and really ask those deep questions. So I want you to think back again to the puzzle pieces that make up your life. Think about your work and your classrooms. Think about wherever it is that you spend most of your time. Do you know the people in those places? I mean, really know them? Do you know the pieces that make up their lives? You see, in this day and age, again, we make such quick determinations about one another without really giving much thought as to who people are. We've stopped having deep conversations with one another, all in favor of 140-character chats. Now, you see people frequently calling each other friends and best friends on Facebook and celebrating anniversaries for things. But truly, people don't know who we are. And that can only come by us sharing our experiences. A lot of times when we do ask these questions, people think we're prying or we're just trying to get too close. Well, my challenge to you today is that you should get close. You should pry, respectfully and genuinely, because there's nothing worse than prying disingenuously. Get to know one another. You really will find that you have a lot in common with people that you otherwise might not even give a second glance to. That quick hello you did today might even blossom into something more, a friendship. So please do take time after this to say hello to one another, not just in 10 seconds, but ask something else. This brings me to my next point. So as the person who introduced me mentioned, I come from a policymaking background. And throughout my experiences in this process, I noticed that culture really didn't play a whole lot into this. And I often wondered why. Not a lot of times is there a cultural argument for or against a certain policy, but there are times when it's warranted. And this usually surfaces in health policy, because healthcare, more than anything else, serves at the heart of who we are. And it does affect us directly. You see, health policy is not just black or white, or as I like to call it, chicken or beef. If anything, it's more like a soup, because once it's said and done, the things that factor in are more, and we cannot even separate them afterwards. We can't take out the ingredients afterwards. So I'll give you another example. So early on in my career, I worked for a healthcare nonprofit that catered to Hispanic and Latino communities. And my job was to work with other minority organizations to make sure that these groups were represented. And our chief job was to educate lawmakers, not just on these communities and their needs, but on the why. Why would a certain policy or law disproportionately or negatively affect these communities? But the biggest education was not in teaching these lawmakers that. It was the education that I got. Not only did I learn how similar my culture was to the people that I served, but as well, I learned that I don't have to be from these cultures or to be from these communities to understand them, to empathize with them, to be sensitive to them, and ultimately to represent them in discourse. So what does this have to do with you? In this lovely nation of ours, we all have a voice. But that voice, in order for it to be heard, you must be willing to share. You must be willing to speak your experiences. You must be willing to listen to other people's experiences. You must be able to ask the questions that elicit those experiences. You see, today, policy is everywhere around us. Every day and every night, we're surrounded by decisions. We're surrounded by news about policies, about laws, about debates happening in Congress, or even here in our own home states. We all have a part to play in this. Like I said, lawmakers are not experts, and they too have to be educated on things. And a lot of that happens only if we share our stories and our experiences. So, if you imagine again the voices that are in this room, if we all brought our perspectives to the table, imagine what a beautiful and complete picture we could all paint about the experiences of this room today, of our communities, and our world at large. So again, I tell you to take advantage of all the diverse places that you walk through, that you live in, that you work in, and that you go to school in. Because you just might find out again just how much in common you have with people. You see, I took for granted, just a little bit, not for most of my college career, but just what a wonderful experience it was to be with people from all walks of life, with all different experiences. And as soon as I noticed that, I started to take advantage more of the people around me. And I encourage you to do the same. You see, the biggest lesson that I have learned so far in my young life, I'm not gonna say how old I am, but anyway, is that as I walk through life, I don't walk it alone. I don't just simply walk it as myself. You see, I walk it as me, as a daughter, a sister, a Kenyan and an American, a Black woman, a lawyer, a philanthropist, a godmother, can you tell I'm a proud godmother, and a friend. You see, these are the puzzle pieces that make up my life. These are the people and things that make up the salad of who I am. They make me a rich individual, and they influence what I do in my life and how I react to events. So yet again, I ask you, what makes you up? You see, we all have a unique identity, a unique perspective, and we all have a voice to lend, to make this world a better place. So, the last missing piece, again, can only be answered by the question, who are you? Kind of like that CSI song. Who are you? Well, I'm Hilda Morangi, and I'm the sum of all my parts. Thank you.
So, a quick exercise we can do. Everybody got their notebooks, little journals, right? And we have an exercise we want you to do. We want you to start with a statement, the first two words, I am, and then complete that. And do that for the, see if you can do it for 10. We were gonna just do 5, but if you can only get to 5, that's fine. But see if you can get to 10 I am statements. So here's one that I have that I constantly think about. I am struggling with my belief in religion. Another one I had is I am feeling conflicted about America's future. And then I had a more joyful one. I am joyful when I'm around my granddaughters. I have a 5-year-old and a 16-month-old now, right?
You tried to destroy this room yesterday.
And so they give me hope. So anyway, those are some ones I came up with.
Elise, were you interested in sharing?
A few things. I heard some great things, and I thought about what she said over here. I'm sorry, what was your name? Sandra. I'm going to go first because I want to add, and I picked up my pen, and I was like, no, don't do that. No, that wasn't good, but no, don't do that. But I put that I'm sensitive, I'm talkative, I'm caring, I'm competitive, I'm goal-oriented, I'm fun. I'm adventurous. I think I'm fun. He might not think so.